All right, y'all. Today I'm going to talk about something happening in Berea that most people around here are avoiding. And depending upon who you ask, Berea is growing regardless. But, is it growing in the best possible way, or is it slowly losing the things that, people were falling in love with it for in the first place? So, as someone who is in real estate every day, who's talking to local buyers and sellers, I'm talking to locals, I'm talking to people that are relocating from out of state. I'm hearing both sides of, the story constantly. And so, while I'm driving on my way to my office this morning, I really want to talk about what's actually happening in Berea, Kentucky, because I think that this conversation is way more complicated than people make it seem, and I'm just here to state my opinion. So, if you've lived here in Berea, Kentucky your whole life, you've probably already thought about what I've mentioned, is that Berea is really feeling different right now. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way, I don't mean it negatively, but it really feels like the pace the pace is different. The housing market feels different. The traffic, driving across town every day feels different. The types of buyers, our neighbors that are moving here are starting to feel different. And even the conversations that people are starting to have around town in Berea feel a lot different than they did 5 or 10 years ago. So, I remember whenever buyers used to describe Berea, I started in 2019, and, a lot of people relocating here were describing it as affordable, cheap. And now they're still doing that, but mostly it's well, it's cheaper than where I come from. And honestly, that's a huge shift. And so honestly, I think housing is where people are starting to feel the change the most, because back in 2019 when I started, I bought my first home for $99,000, and homes that would have felt expensive a few years ago are starting to feel normal here. Starter homes really aren't starter home prices anymore. And even whenever rates started to go up, the prices weren't really, going up with that or crashing down the way that people expected. And so back in 2019, I first got licensed. I bought mine for $99,000. It was a 3-bed, 1 bath. I had an FHA loan that meant that it had certain conditions that had to be met, and there was no problems. It just feels like so many people are discouraged about buying here, especially if they're local. But at the same time, if someone's moving from a much higher cost of living area, Berea can still feel affordable to them. So what I mean by that is, we all see the stories about people cashing out on their, similar properties from out of state, but to them, coming here, they can afford 3 of them compared to their 1. And so there's definitely been more people moving into Berea from outside the area. I want to say that I seen on the news, we all seen the area, snippet, the local news go on about how Madison County is the fourth fastest growing county in America. Some people are retirees, some people are, relocating for work, and some people are just wanting a slower pace. Honestly, I understand the appeal. If I was from somewhere, way more expensive, and I found a place with mountains nearby and, a cool art scene, a college town, and lower prices, I would probably want to move here too. I mean, Berea is still affordable. We do have a lot to do here. We are like a family friendly town. But I also understand, because I am a local, I understand why other locals are starting to feel frustrated. Because when outside money enters into a smaller market, it's going to change everything. Back whenever COVID happened and we started to see the real estate market booming, I mean, we had multiple offers on homes that no one had seen in person before. We had appraisals waived, and our buyers are starting to get priced out against buyers from out of state, expensive areas. And so, like, I think the conversation gets really complicated here because most people say that they want growth, but at what expense? So with growth, ideally we have more businesses, more restaurants. We do have higher property values, which is more opportunity. But at the same time, once growth starts happening, people are starting to realize that growth changes other things as well. Um, we've got traffic, your traffic's going to be highly impacted. We're going to have, the higher cost of living because, yeah, although it helps us homeowners that our property values go up, I don't think we think about long term, that's going to affect our taxes going up for those who don't already own a home. Whenever the home prices go up, that means it's going to be less affordable for them. And so it almost feels like there's not as much opportunity for the locals who not necessarily, were late to the game. It's just they didn't get into the real estate game at the same time us others did. And although there's some of us that are sitting on thousands, if not tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, that's all great until we, go and put that into the next home. It's not the same value of the dollar, I guess, that it would have been in 2022. So I don't really know where the happy medium is. I don't know, where's how much growth is too much growth. And I really just want to see like other people's opinions. If you have came from out of state to Berea, if you're thinking about coming from out of state to Berea, or if you're like me, if you're a local, born here, raised here, Berean, what your thoughts and opinions are about the recent growth in Berea, Kentucky, because I'm very curious to see what we look like within the next 5 to 10 years, because in my honest opinion, it's almost even as if like Richmond has become the new Lexington. And I'm curious to see if Berea is going to become the new Richmond. But that's really all that's on my mind this morning. I would absolutely love to know everybody else's thoughts on this. If you could, I hit a bump. If you could drop them in the comments, send them to me privately. I don't care. I'll read through them whenever I have the time. I really value everyone else around here's opinion. And I'm very curious to see where everybody else thinks that we're going. But until next time, y'all.